Hello everybody and welcome back to a new video. My name is Sarah and today I'm doing a video that I'm really nervous about because I don't know how well it's gonna go, but also really excited about, and that is book recommendations based off of my top 10 Spotify songs from the last 30 days. So I'm gonna look at the top 10 songs that I have listened to on Spotify over the last 30 days and use them to give you book recommendations. Now, I haven't even looked up what my top 10 are yet. I'm gonna do this as we're going, you know? I will link the website that I use down below in the description in case you want to look at your Spotify stats. You will need to link your Spotify account to the website, but as far as I'm aware, it's safe. You guys are gonna find out about how elite my music taste is. You know, I listen to a lot of underground stuff, like probably stuff you haven't heard of. I listen to a lot of like international music. You know, there's this Korean group that I really like. Probably haven't heard of them. They're called BTS. Okay, interesting. Why is it that one song is on here twice? Wow, okay. So I've got 3 songs from Royal Blood, 1 song from Between Friends, 2 songs from Illuminati Hotties, 2 songs from BTS, which are much lower on the list than what I thought they were gonna be, 1 song from Taylor Swift. See, I don't like that I have 3 songs from the same artist on here. I wanted like max 2 songs from the same artist. We're gonna go 10, 9, 8, work our way backwards, okay? Alright. So the sad thing is I can't play these songs for you without getting a like copyright strike issue thing on YouTube. So I will leave a I'll leave a link to each of these songs down in the description. I'll leave a Spotify link. Number 10 is Pool Hopping by Illuminati Hotties. Okay, I'm back. Wow, this is proving to be much harder than what I thought it was gonna be. I really had to dig back deep into like quite, I guess, my archive of stuff that I've read, because I realized this song is very like a summer bop. It feels like, you know, you're running around with your friends and you're doing all sorts of like, you know, crazy stuff or whatever. And I realized lately I read a lot more depressing books that don't really like encompass that feeling of just like carefree young years, you know, going crazy, going wild, pool hopping. There's a verse in the song. It says, "Squeezing a melty scoop of ice cream, I let it drip across your backseat. Guess I could wipe it up, but I asked you if maybe you'd pull over. Now I'm pool hopping and window shopping, off hours, butts of towers." So that like idea of just like eating ice cream and making a mess in your friend's the backseat of their car reminded me of a specific scene from Paper Towns by John Green. If you've read this book, you'll know it happens kind of towards the last maybe 100 pages. It's actually really, really funny. It happens with just kind of like a really messy situation in the backseat of a moving car. I don't want to spoil it though. It is quite funny. But this book, not necessarily like the first half, but definitely like the last 150 pages has that feeling of like going out and doing some crazy adventure with your best friends, and because they go on this wild like car ride across the East Coast line, drive to go search for Margot, and it just has that very like tight-knit friendship, light-hearted feel to it, even though this does have kind of some more philosophical kind of things to think about. I know people either love or hate John Green. I've always loved him. I loved him in high school. I read this in high school. So like I said, I really had to dig back to find this, but I feel like particularly the last 150 pages gives me the vibes of Pool Hopping by Illuminati Hotties. So number 9, we have Boilermaker by Royal Blood. Okay, so for this song, I'm picking Jawbone by Monica Ojeda. This is a horror novel translated from Spanish. The reason why this song reminded me of this book is for the lyrics. Some of the lyrics, I was looking for some kind of savior, someone still counting on my worst behavior, knew there would be trouble with devil eyes and magic hands. And then later down, it says, something's twisted up right inside me, I'll let you use it up, so when you do leave, take me to the edge and let me show you what was on my mind. Don't put all your money on me, because you and me are two of a kind. This reminded me particularly of Annalise and Fernanda's relationship, and kind of the group of girls that are kind of worshipping this god of Annalise's making. Has very just kind of like dark undertones to it, and kind of the idea of like adolescence having this sort of like almost twisted, convoluted potential to be anything. It could be dark, could be good, anything at all. But yeah, this song reminded me of this book. And then next we have Life Goes On by BTS. So I'd like to just mention that I don't speak Korean, so I did look up the English translations to this song, and then there's one other BTS song that I will be looking up the English translations for. I will leave the link to the website that I use. It's a blog, dualsetbangtan.wordpress.com. I'll leave the link down below because I think it's really well done. Now obviously I don't know, I can't speak on the accuracy of the translations, but the owner of the blog goes into a lot of detail and some things, and even makes a couple comments on a few of their translational choices. So this song is kind of about something bad happening, and then realizing that you need to get up and keep moving, because the world keeps moving and you need to as well. For instance, there's one day the world stopped without any forewarning. Spring, not knowing how to wait or how to read the room, showed up anyway. The streets where footprints are wiped away. I who lies fallen here, time flows on its own without even saying sorry. I'd borrow this music and tell you, people say the world has changed. Thankfully, between you and I, it's still the same. For this, I picked Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I actually just read this month. I think this one really links up with this song really well. We're following two creative partners, best friends, as they go over the course of like 30 years and work together to develop this video game company. But it really focuses on these two characters and as individuals, and the complexity of their relationship, and then relationships with other people. But there are at least 2 or 3 big points in this book where very traumatic things happen, and the characters end up dealing with this trauma and their grief in kind of a standstill sort of way, and they end up having to pull each other out of that grief. So I think that it really fits this song really well. It's also just like a really beautiful book, and the song is just very beautiful. So yeah, I think Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow fits Life Goes On very well. Number 7 is Nothing New featuring Phoebe Bridgers by Taylor Swift. Okay, so for this song, I am picking All's Well by Mona Awad. So the idea of like a woman being replaced because she's not like the shiny new object of fascination anymore isn't like the main focus of this story, but it does take a big part in the story, a big part in like the main character's kind of internal and external conflict. She is suffering from severe chronic pain, has this really debilitating injury, and because of that and kind of like her decline, she ends up kind of getting usurped in this theater program that she runs, as well as her relationship with her husband ends up crumbling, and he later on, after they separate, gets a new woman. And I think like the idea of not being this bright, shiny woman anymore, because she is suffering so much, she is then kind of replaced or looked over. It does play a big part into this. And then after that, we have our second BTS song, Run BTS. So the song is basically about each of the members of BTS and how much work they had to put into getting to where they are, and how many times they didn't think that they were gonna make it, and that it was like a huge struggle to get to where they are. And then there's the line, above a running guy is a flying guy, above whom there is running Bangtan. So the translator said, kind of a note, above a running man is a flying man is an idiom that means there's someone who's better than you no matter how good you are. Or kind of, I'm taking it in order to link it to this book, is that no matter like what you do, there's always going to be that bigger entity that's kind of above you and everything, but that you still gotta really push to be able to do what you can. And because of that, I'm linking this to Babel by R.F. Kuan. Now I could have linked this song also to Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, but since I already used it, I'm using Babel by R.F. Kuan, and I know this is probably kind of a weird link, but to me it makes sense. So this is about Robin, and he basically has to spend like a good chunk of his childhood studying and working his butt off in order to get into Babel, which is this translation institute at Oxford, and while there he has to work even harder in order to meet the educational expectations. But then there's like a shift in this where he ends up joining this secret society that's trying to overthrow the empire, the British Empire and colonialism, and kind of what the Translation Institute does within colonialism and the British Empire. And there's this feeling constantly of how small they are, and there's always that how big the British Empire is. Which kind of made me think of the above a running man is a flying man kind of idiom, but just how hard Robin and his friends have to work, not only in the school but also within the secret society and what they want to do within it. I think in a weird way it does fit this song. So then after that we have song number 5, which is Cuff, specifically the single edit, by Illuminati Hotties. So this one was really easy. For this one I'm picking The Throne of Glass, the whole series, but this is the first book by Sarah J. Maas. I'm picking this for a couple of different reasons. Some of which have to do with later books in the series, but like I said, I'm recommending the whole series. So the chorus goes, I cuff my t-shirt sleeves and grip my teeth, how else can I tell myself I can do most anything? Is a very common mindset in Selena Sardothian's whole life. She is our main character, and she basically has the idea of like, you tell her that something's impossible and she's gonna do it, and she's gonna do it in style. So then there's also, it takes a troubled type of freedom to drink all night. It reminds me of the beginning of how the third book starts, except she's drinking all day and all night. But yeah, just the idea of like just gritting your teeth and getting it done and being like that this is happening because I can do it. So there's obviously like a lot of main characters that you can like say that mindset applies to in like many different books, but it just kind of really feels like a song for the main character in this series. Song 4 is Pressed to Death by Illuminati Hotties. So I had kind of a hard time with this one. This one is less of a link because of like the contents or what the song is about, and more of like the sound of the song and the vibe. Particularly the first, like the opening of the song and the first like verse reminds me so much of Gideon from Gideon the Ninth. Like, me just reading off the lyrics isn't gonna do it justice because it's a lot of like the sound of it, so you have to listen to it. But basically Gideon is just so crass and sassy and sarcastic, and is just filled with some of like the most like immature jokes, but in the best way possible. And so that's why I like this song makes me think of this book. I realized I haven't really been talking about what the books are about, because I'm more just linking the vibe. I am gonna explain what this one is about. We're basically we're in this like galactic empire, and we're following Gideon the Ninth, who is this indentured swordswoman for the 9th house of this empire, and one day she ends up being coerced into being kind of the right-hand swordswoman, the cavalier of Harrow, who is the kind of heir to this 9th house, and she needs to go into this kind of a puzzly competition in order to compete to try to be one of the emperor's kind of right-hand necromantic women. And so this is the beginning of a 4-book series. There's currently 3 books out, but in this one we are kind of following Harrow the necromancer and Gideon her cavalier as they explore this haunted mansion and do all of these sorts of like necromantic puzzles. But yeah, just the beginning of this song reminds me of Gideon a lot. And then number 3 is I Love You by Between Friends. Okay, so for this one, I am picking The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab for 2 reasons that you might find kind of like loose. But basically, in the first verse, it says, I see your colors, never forget me. And then it's repeated, I love you tenderly, tragically, in the chorus. And so I feel like that vibe, based off of those 2 lines alone, reminds me of this book because we're following Addie LaRue. It's on her wedding night in what, the 1700s? Yeah, 1714 in France, and she doesn't want to get married. She wants to have freedom and be able to travel and see the world. So she makes a deal with this demon in the forest for her freedom, but in exchange, nobody will ever remember her. The minute she leaves the room, people forget that she exists and that they even met her. Even when she goes back, they don't recognize her at all. She can't leave any sort of like physical mark on the world, so she writes something, it just disappears. And then one day in like, I don't know, the 2010s or something, she ends up stumbling upon this bookstore in America and find somebody who is able to remember her. It is a love story. It is a story kind of about Addie and her life. I absolutely love the character that she meets in the bookstore that remembers her. I particularly loved his storyline, and kind of like how he ends up being incorporated into the story, and then how in his own personal growth and development. But yeah, I think the I love you tenderly, tragically, and then the don't forget me fits very, very well with this story, and just kind of like the sound and the vibe reminds me a lot of in the present day storyline of this book. So our number 2 and our number 1 song are both by Royal Blood. And so I think I'm going to do number 2 and then I'm going to do number 1, and I'm going to actually pick a different song. So number 1 is Trouble's Coming by Royal Blood, but I'm going to pick something else because we already have multiple Royal Blood songs on this list. We're gonna do number 2 next. Number 2 is She's Creeping by Royal Blood. Okay, so for this book, I'm particularly looking at the lyrics. She's creeping into my bloodstream. And then as I stop listening, just waiting for an answer to a question that I already know, I'll let you down, it's such a shame. Maybe I'm feeling like I'm alright living in the shadow. You're not around, so don't miss one, makes you miserable. Reminds me of Tripping Arcadia by Kit Mayquest, because this book deals a lot with a woman who is working for this really like upper class rich family, and she, being the help, is kind of like on the edge of these like on the edge and in the shadows of these really lavish parties, just kind of watching everybody. And then it deals a lot with substance abuse as well as poisonings. So that, like, the vibe of this, she's creeping into my bloodstream, and then the you stop listening and maybe I'm alright living in the shadow, just kind of reminded me of the vibe of parts of this book. But basically, like I said, we're following this young woman who ends up being hired on as a assistant to a doctor of this wealthy family in order to help take care of the son of this wealthy family who's very, very sick. But then she's also an assistant for these very lavish parties full of debauchery. But very quickly she also realizes that the patriarch of this family is the reason why her father has been injured and is now out of work. And so she ends up deciding to get revenge. And kind of the revenge element of this story, and the I'm not who you want me to be, and kind of the different levels of like class and things like that, that song reminded me of this book. So then lastly, instead of doing the #1 song, which is another Royal Blood song, I'm gonna pick not the number 11 song, because that's another Royal Blood song, but I'm gonna pick number 12, which is Pink Venom by Blackpink. So for this song, we're gonna again do less about what the lyrics are about, and more about like the composition of the song in general. So this song, if you've listened to it, you'll probably have noticed at least one kind of like callback to an early 2000s song, or just like another big famous song. The one that's the most easiest to recognize is Rihanna's Ponder Replay. There's also a reference to a Notorious B.I.G. song, a 50 Cent song, a Taylor Swift song, possibly more. Those are the ones that I have either recognized or I have seen other people mention. And so because of that kind of like pull from other very, very big popular songs and using that in this song, I found a book that kind of does the same thing, and that is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. In this book, we are following our main character who is obsessed with slasher horror films. There is a lot of like discussion of some of the most famous slasher films in this book, and one day she ends up thinking that a slasher has come to her hometown and is killing people off, and so she is using her knowledge of all of the vast amount of slasher films that she has watched in order to catch this murderer. There's a lot of just like her discussing different slasher films and kind of looking at how they could compare to what's happening in her hometown. She submits essays that critically examine slasher films and kind of the components of a slasher film to her professor, and so I kind of think that that calling back to all of these iconic films is kind of a good link to Pink Venom, which has a callback to a lot of iconic songs. So those are my top 10-ish. We did kind of fudge that last one and switched out a song, but those are my top 10 Spotify song book recommendations. If you have any book recommendations that you think would have fit a song better, please let me know down in the comments. I'm always looking for book recommendations. I'd also love to hear if you guys have similar music tastes to me, if you have very different music tastes, if you have songs that you would recommend books kind of like pair together with. I'd love to hear that. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you consider sticking around and subscribing if you haven't already. But as always, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!